All right, hey everybody. Just for everybody who's online right now, I am sitting with Joe Kent, who is running for Congress out of Washington State's 3rd District. We're in the Cowlitz County Republican headquarters. We have people in the audience today as well who will be asking questions. I have some of my own questions that I'll be asking. I have questions that people from the community have given me earlier. And I will be taking questions from the live stream as well. There's only a couple rules. The only rules are is that we cannot talk about 2020's election, and we cannot talk about the evil C word. Because if we do, then I will be deleted off of YouTube again, and we know how that works. So those are just the two subjects that we cannot talk about at all. It's fun. Actually, I covered one of Joe's events, and I got a strike for it because somebody was talking about it. So yeah, good times.
I'm glad you said that up front.
Yeah, I figured I'd start off just with that little disclaimer. All right. So Joe, go ahead. I'm going to let you start. Just kind of give a quick rundown of who you are and why you are running.
Sure. Yeah, I'm used to doing these like standing up, so I'll try and do a combination of both here. So I think most of the folks in the audience know me. I spent a little bit over 20 years in the military. I was in Special Forces, deployed to combat 11 times. Never intended on running for office. Really, my story is kind of a story of the America First saga. So enlisted to go fight our enemies after 9/11, got a chance to go do that. I saw really that the American people are ready, willing, and able to go fight for this country because they know it's something special. It's worth defending. However, our permanent ruling class has no issues with lying to us, leading us into wars that only benefit them, shipping our jobs overseas, and really just working to benefit folks in Wall Street, the military-industrial complex, elected and non-elected officials. So had a front row seat to that. President Trump really changed a lot of that for me because I think he was actually fighting for us from a foreign policy perspective. He was actually putting our country first. I got a chance to deploy under President Trump. He gave us the authorities and the resources we needed. So I decided to stay in government service after I hit my 20-year mark in the military. Started a second career in the CIA as a paramilitary operations officer. That was about 3 years ago. Everything changed for me. My late wife, who was also in the military, was killed fighting ISIS in Syria. She was killed a month after Trump attempted to get our troops out of Syria the first time. So I had to step away, resigned from the agency, wanted to just move back here to the Pacific Northwest, take care of my kids. But I got a chance to meet President Trump, and I told him that, hey, he was getting foreign policy right. He was getting our defense strategy right. He was just being thwarted at every single level. So became a unofficial advisor to the Trump administration after that, started working heavily on the Trump 2020 campaign, moved back here. Everything changed drastically right as I moved back to the Pacific Northwest. 2020 hit us like a ton of bricks between the C word that we can't talk about, all those lockdowns and restrictions, the way that drastically changed our country, and then the riots of 2020, watching Antifa and BLM be weaponized by one side of the aisle to burn down Portland, Oregon, where I grew up, to march into this district that we now live in. I could realize the country was changing in a very drastic way, and then the election of 2020 happened. I had issues with that I think you all are probably aware of. We won't get into details for the sake of the stream. But then Jamie Herrera Butler voted to certify the election, and then she went along with the mainstream media's talking points that there was this massive insurrection. So when she did that, I realized that it was time to start fighting back in the political realm because our country was about to be 100% lost, and things have only unfortunately gotten worse in the last 15 months since that happened. So ever since then, I've been off to the races trying to make a difference. Announced about a year and a half ago, worked as hard as I could, got President Trump's endorsement, the endorsement of a couple other prominent folks out there, endorsed by 3 different counties in the district, and right now just trying to reach as many people in the 3rd Congressional District as I can to unify us under the America First agenda to get rid of the establishment swamp creature, Jamie Herrera Butler.
Awesome. All right. So, like I said, I have a couple questions for you, and there's no time limit. You can, if you want to go on and on, like if everybody ends up going home because you're talking so much, well, that's their deal. They can watch it later. So, the first question is, what's going to be your desired accomplishments if you get elected in your first month?
So my first month, that's good. So for the first 2 years that we're actually in Congress, we have to deal with Joe Biden still being in the White House. So I think a lot of times congressmen and senators will say, on my first month, I'm going to pass X amount of bills because that's what the legislature is supposed to do. They're supposed to pass bills. However, with Biden sitting in the Oval Office, I think our job is to impeach him. So day one, I will sign on to articles of impeachment for Joe Biden. Marjorie Taylor Greene already has some drafted. I will just sign right onto those. I think we can add articles based on everything that's happening right now with Ukraine, Hunter's laptop. We can continue to improve that bill. I'd also like to add a second impeachment for Kamala Harris as well. We have a clear vector there with her cheering on and fundraising the riots of 2020 that killed people, destroyed property, burned down American cities. So that's all going to happen. Oversight. Congress has this amazing ability to conduct oversight. So the election of 2020, I think that there should be an oversight committee onto that topic, and we won't go any further. Happy to talk about that offline with people. That's huge. Also, the January 6th narrative that Jeremy Herrera Butler is still continuing to this day has been used. It's been weaponized against American citizens. We've seen the FBI target people that were there present on that day in January 6th, deprive them of all their constitutional rights, throw them away into essentially political prisons. I spent most of my adult life fighting overseas, totalitarian regimes, terrorist organizations, and this is what authoritarian regimes do. They turn their intelligence services and their law enforcement wing against their political opposition, and they throw them away into dungeons, and they're locked up, never to be seen again. And that's what's happened with a lot of the January 6th prisoners, but also that narrative is incredibly powerful because it's being weaponized against moms and dads who happen to go to school boards. We've caught the FBI counterterrorism task force going and targeting these people. So this is something that Congress can do. It's not a legislative action, it's oversight action. It's to actually show the American people exactly what happened on January 6th, how many undercover agents, human sources, and what type of involvement the federal government had in January 6th. Remove the Freedom of Information Act protection that there is in the Sergeant at Arms office, the Capitol Police offices. Just lay it all out for the American people, because this insurrection narrative has been used against Republicans and conservatives. This is how we start to bring our national security state to heel. Like I proudly worked in the CIA. I think we need actual intelligence agencies that are defending our country but not targeting Americans. So everything from January 6th all the way to the abuses of the NSA, some of the most potent tools the intelligence community have that were leveraged against President Trump. We've seen a lot of that come to light now. We were told it was Russian collusion for like 3 years that ripped the country apart. Turns out it was the DNC collaborating with people that were in our intelligence community. Just as recently as with the Hunter Biden's laptop, we had 20 plus senior, like former directors of the CIA and the NSA, those guys saying that Hunter's laptop, that whole story was Russian disinformation. Well, we just caught them red-handed. It wasn't. So the national security state has to be brought to heel. Oversight as well. The whole COVID narrative and holding Fauci accountable, COVID has destroyed this country over the last 2 years. We've had the largest, I just messed up the C word, that thing, and really this is, we can hold Fauci accountable for the things that he said, but then also the largest transfer of wealth we've had from major corporations down to small businesses. That the American people deserve answers. What did the government know? What was their involvement with it? So oversight is key. I think we can turn basically every committee into an oversight committee. Armed Services Committee should be looking at Afghanistan. I mean, we had this disaster where we left Americans on the field of battle. We conducted a drone strike on the way out that we were told, I'm laughing, but it's not funny, killed a family of aid workers. We were told it was a bunch of ISIS terrorists, and then we just leave. We bring in 130,000 unvetted Afghan refugees, but yet we leave American citizens there. So oversight, so really obstruction, impeachment, and oversight is the name of the game until we can win in 2024 and get President Trump back in office.
So talking about oversight a little bit, today, I don't know if you've heard or not, but two of the people who were involved with the Whitmer kidnapping attempt have just been acquitted, and two other ones have a deadlocked jury right now. And the reasoning behind their acquittal is that the FBI
100%.
made, coerce these people into this whole idea. At least that's what the jury's saying, right? So if you're involved with some of this oversight, are you going to be trying to hold some of these agents, these individuals and those in charge accountable for the coercion that might have happened on January 6th, but apparently definitely happened in Michigan? Mm-hmm. What would be your desired outcome for some of that oversight with some of these things?
So number one is transparency for the American people. But number two is we do have to hold people accountable. So I've worked in human intelligence operations, and they sound, very espionage, cloak and dagger. However, they're highly bureaucratic. It's well documented. You need certain permissions to do certain things. There's clear chains of command when you're dealing with human sources, especially when you're brushing up against infiltrating organizations and having your human sources being involved in things that potentially could be either criminal or could be terrorist in some nature, or that could actually harm somebody. And that's what we saw with the Gretchen Whitmer case. So I know for a fact that thing was either ran completely renegade and off the books, which I doubt, because the FBI is ran by a bunch of accountants and lawyers. I am guessing that it was ran with a good deal of supervision. I seriously doubt that whatever GS 12 or 13 was there controlling the agents directly, just decided that they would concoct this massive, like, okay, we're going to come up with this plot to kidnap Gretchen Whitmer. Possible? Yeah, sure, it's possible. I just doubt it. I've been dealing with this stuff for quite a while. These guys had supervision. It's all documented. The exact same thing is true for January 6th. The guy that was the senior agent in charge of the Gretchen Whitmer case, he got promoted to the Washington, D.C. field office right at the exact same time. So there's a lot of questions that have to be answered, and I think we do need people that understand how the intelligence community works and these things work to actually hold them accountable. So people do need to be held accountable. This can't just be one of those things where we're like, oh, well, we kind of goofed that up, anyways, on to the next story. We'll make sure we'll put some more, we'll put out a memo that has some bureaucratic constraints to make sure this never happens again. That's not good enough.
Right. Yeah. So what's going to be your main goal if you get into office? Are you going to be trying to make law or repeal law?
Probably more repealing, and then I would say obstructing what the Biden administration is doing. When we take back power and we get in a good America First agenda in there, I would not want to go on a law-making spree. I think there's a lot of laws we need to repeal. Like if we're going to start passing laws, I think we should find a law or two that we're going to repeal along with that, because America in general, especially our business sector, is just incredibly overregulated.
All right. I'll move on to education a little bit. What's your idea for fixing our education system, kind of making us globally competitive again, since we have fallen so drastically?
I mean, big picture is we have to get back to actually educating people. We have to go through a massive, I think, project, our generation does, to bring back our manufacturing, to get back to being energy independent. And that's not just like flipping a switch somewhere. Right now, America is we're hooked on foreign labor, we're hooked on foreign manufacturing, we're hooked on printing just easy money. It's going to be difficult for this country to get back to doing these very hard things that we have to do to preserve the security of the country. So I think we have to get back to educating kids in the trades. We have to have a somewhat of a cultural shift where we say, hey, it can be a really good and honorable thing to leave high school and get a manual labor type of job, because we don't need to be importing people to do those things. Same thing with a big focus on STEM. I mean, right now, Republicans talk about this all the time. Like, we love legal immigration because they say, like, well, Americans just can't do STEM, and they laugh at it. But like last time I checked, Silicon Valley, like the birthplace of technology, it's in America. We're just telling Americans they can't do that because it's cheaper to import foreigners to do it. So getting back to actually teaching people STEM. As far as the cultural issues go, we have to protect our kids from, I don't know a better way to put it, the grooming that's taking place in our institution, our educational institutions, and that comes from critical race theory, the Planned Parenthood sex ed agenda, the 1619 Project. I think big picture, as far as like, I'm running for a federal position, so I think something key that I can do is get rid of the federal Department of Education. I don't think Washington, D.C. has anything to do with educating kids. It's just employing bureaucrats who are pumping this woke nonsense into our institutions. So getting rid of the Department of Education, I think, is key. Going through the education grants line by line and seeing if there's anything in there about CRT or whatever they're calling it this week, diversity, equity, and inclusion, or social emotional learning, which sounds all nice and good, and then you get into it. So looking through those and cutting off any kind of federal funding, I think, is something very powerful that we can do. Same thing with Planned Parenthood. This is a big bone I have to pick with Jamie Hura Butler. Jamie prides herself on being able to get money for the district. Go to her website. On the top line is like, I've got X amount of $1 million for the district. That's because Jamie's on the appropriations committee, which is very powerful. But what she'll do is she will go and she'll earmark different projects, and we'll go into these massive omnibus packages. And so then Jamie is beholden to signing off on the omnibus packages. But what else is in those omnibus packages? Well, who knows? You have to pass the bill to know what's in the bill, as Nancy Pelosi would say. But also, there's funding in there for Planned Parenthood. There's funding in there for infringements on our Second Amendment rights. So there's a lot of Republicans out there, like Jamie, who say, like, I am very pro-life, and I understand Jamie in her personal life is very pro-life. I get that. I'm not questioning that. But when it comes time to vote to fund these institutions like Planned Parenthood that are committing infanticide and that are brainwashing our kids with Planned Parenthood sex ed, the funding's all right there in the omnibus bills. So for the first 2 years that I'm in office, you're going to hear me come back to the district a lot and hear like what I said no to and what bills I'm not passing, like the omnibus system on every level. And I'll probably talk about it a lot tonight because it touches so much. That omnibus system has to be absolutely destroyed.
Well, you kind of touched on it a little bit, but my next question was, What kind of solutions do you have? Because I mean, this whole grooming thing is becoming a big deal right now. Like it's and it's hilarious because as everybody's trying to shrug it off, the media's trying to shrug it off. All of a sudden, it's the most talked about word that conservatives are using this word as an insult. But I mean, it's a real problem. So, what would be one of your solutions for? Or thing that you'd like to tackle when it comes to the actual literal problem of grooming that's going on in our schools?
From education perspective, like I said, get rid of the federal Department of Education, really go through all those different grants. But I think we need to be able to offer parents an alternative to the public school system. Some parents can afford to homeschool, some parents can afford private schools, but a lot can't. And we all pay taxes, right? So we're paying for these public schools. So I would like to be able to give parents a school choice, school voucher system. In a perfect world, school choice and school voucher works that when you decide to pull your kids out, the money follows the kids. Running for a federal position, I can't dictate to Washington State that the funds follow the kids. I wish I could. In a perfect world, like we'd have harmony between, the federal and the local, or maybe even the federal government in a perfect world wouldn't have to touch this. Or really in a perfect world, our public schools wouldn't be grooming kids and they would just teach them how to read and write. But what it is. Right now we have this public school apparatus that's completely predatory. Many parents, they don't have an option. They have to send their kids to these schools. So I want a federal school choice, school voucher program. I understand that some people don't want anything to do with it. They don't want to take government funds, but I want it available so that when parents say, I'm not sending my kids to public school anymore because I just don't trust it. I want them to have that option to pull their kids out. So I want there to be some federal funding available for that.
So the Constitution is something that's talked about. A lot of people say that it's a forgotten document that means nothing anymore.
Yeah.
There's a lot of us out there that disagree with that. We think the Constitution is the law of the land and it should be that way. So KJ from... or no, not KJ, Mark from, I think he's from Woodland, asked, have you ever read the Constitution?
I have. Yes.
Awesome. How do we get the United States back to constitutionality? Because the Constitution lays it out very clearly, right? The government shall not, and the government should do X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
But now the government does X, Y, Z, A, B, C, and everything else.
Yeah.
So what would be your idea to bring back the actual constitutional United States?
I think it comes with discipline. Like you have to, if a piece of legislation is proposed, and I'm here and I'm sitting there as a congressman, I have to say, hey, is this within my scope of duties? And it doesn't matter how I feel about the topic. We're sitting in Cowlitz County, and Jerry Cooper has a really good example of child care grants, and everybody's pro child care or whatever. But then he opens up the Constitution, and so where does the federal government get involved with child care? Well, it doesn't. That doesn't mean you're anti-child care. That just means you're following the Constitution. Somebody else at a more local level can handle things like that. But I think from the federal perspective, really just sticking to what our scope of duties are and letting the states, and then even the states, letting the localities handle business. I mean, I do feel like it's easy to say it's cut and dried and it's super clear. Sometimes it isn't. But in those times, we have processes that are built in where we adjudicate how that's supposed to work. However, just the massive amount of the federal government can do everything. We can promise you absolutely everything is, I think we just have to get back to being honest with people and saying this isn't in the Constitution and I can't do anything about it.
Right. Yeah. So speaking of that, KJ from Kalama asked, on March 26th, you tweeted, seize Bill Gates' land and all land owned by foreign nations to grow crops and raise livestock. His question is that constitutional and how?
So foreign lands, I don't see anything in the Constitution that says foreigners can come buy up our property. So especially if it's owned by the Chinese Communist Party, who's tying it in with the One Belt, One Road initiative, and they owe us reparations for COVID. So yeah, we'll seize that. With Bill Gates, there's a couple different vectors. Bill Gates is, in every sense of the word, an oligarch, a technocrat. I mean, he's running a monopoly, not just on information. He was behind a lot of the vaccines, the digital vaccine passports. Bill Gates clearly has a nefarious intent for America. And so I think this is a place where the federal government should step in. And Bill Gates is already saying, as we approach a food crisis, which is basically self-induced because of the Biden administration's policies. But Bill Gates is basically buying up farmland, so is the Chinese Communist Party, and they're saying we're going to change how Americans eat food. We're going to try and move them to this new diet. So at no point in time did the founders intend for our nation to be this experimental ground for the extremely ultra-wealthy to just come and do whatever they wanted to because we have a free market. We have a free market. However, the free market can't usurp the sovereign nation and the sovereignty of the people. So with Bill Gates, I think eminent domain is a potential. I do think we could pass legislation that says farmland needs to be used as its intent, because this is how we feed our people. If he wants to buy up a bunch of McMansions, like, I'm fine with that. That's not. I don't see where that's a massive issue. But farmland in general, I think this goes to the sovereignty of the American people. No one's going to go, seize his property overnight, unless he's doing something criminal with it. But I do think that we have a clear case to make with a lot of these oligarchs. It's the same thing with big tech. I mean, how long are we going to let big tech regulate how we speak? It's the modern day public square. They control access to our banking. They can control our healthcare. Again, they're trying to move us towards this digital currency with a digital vaccine passport, essentially a social credit score. Are we going to let all that happen at the altar of the free market? Or are we going to, should I speak into this?
Yep.
Right now? Okay. Or should we actually go and do something about that because it presents a clear and present danger to the American people?
All right. So speaking of the America First platform, you say you're running on that platform. You've brought it up a couple times. So there's a couple things on the America First platform that I've been asked about personally, just certain issues on there. So one of them is a temporary pause on legal immigration. Why?
So we have to be specific. Legal immigration. I want a moratorium on any visa that takes a job away from Americans. So, because right now we have a crisis in our country with Americans not being able to obtain decent jobs because either there's too many incentives for them to stay at home and not work, and just the sheer fact that our country is not producing things any longer. So we need to tighten up the labor market in favor of sovereign Americans. So this is another, are we a free market that's essentially an open air bazaar that anyone can come and do commerce in, or are we actually a sovereign country? If people want to marry a foreigner, like you're an American and you go overseas, you fall in love, you want to bring your wife back, I'm fine with that, But these specific visas that are just designed to take away jobs from American citizens, that is wrong on every single level. Now, if there's some random guy out there that has the cure for cancer, in the same way that we brought Einstein over back in World War II, we can make an exception. But I reject the whole premise of, for instance, the H-1B visa system that brings over tech workers, because again, you have Americans, political leaders, a lot of Republicans too, that will say, well, Americans just can't do STEM anymore, so we have to bring in all these Pakistani kids. That's an absolute scam. They work at a rate of 3 to 1 compared to an American citizen. So it's just undercutting and hurting U.S. labor, which is why the corporate donor class, Wall Street, which is why they just say they love immigration left and right, which is why they want to open the borders up. Same thing on the low-skilled end, is they want to bring in unskilled labor that will undercut U.S. labor, and I think we just need to stop that.
Well, I mean, it's one of the Democrats' biggest talking points is that we need illegal immigration because they do the jobs that Americans won't do. I mean, I've picked strawberries. I've cleaned hotel rooms. I've done all these things that they say that we need them for. But yeah, I mean, back when I used to pick strawberries, we didn't have what we have today. And yeah, I totally agree with that. It'd be nice to. I remember back during the recession, Georgia had a 18% unemployment rate, and people were like, well, we don't want to do it. We don't want to pick peaches. And it was during the whole, the Arizona immigration law, and Georgia passed one right next to it. So Georgia was having a hard time finding immigrant workers. Yep. And yet for some reason, with an 18% unemployment rate, they still couldn't find American workers to go pick peaches for, back then it was $15 an hour. Yeah. That was really good money. And they wouldn't do it because they said Americans were too good to do it. Well, that's because Americans have a whole lot of, benefits to not be working and so on. So what would you do to kind of maybe stop that a little bit? Because I think that's part of the culture change. It's so easy to just look at 2020. Everybody did this for an entire year.
Yeah, I mean, the left, the progressives, and the globalists, they want us dependent on the government. They want us hanging out, waiting for our stimulus check, not being any threat to them whatsoever, not accumulating enough capital to do things like get married, have our own kids, buy our own houses. They don't want us to do that. They essentially want us living in crummy apartments, not accumulating any wealth, and not reproducing. So what we need to do is cut off a lot of these essentially universal basic income programs. I mean, the COVID stimulus checks, those have to stop. The welfare for able-bodied people, that has to stop. But also a lot of the over-regulation, that's got to go away. I mean, I'm 42, and I remember working high school summer jobs, and that was totally normal. That wasn't like a weird thing. And I think right now it's actually difficult to hire high school kids to go pick peaches, to go pick blueberries, to go do things that I think with enough cultural incentives of us saying like, hey guys, this is honorable. If you go and you work in the field somewhere, eventually you'll be the guy that's, supervising the people, and then you'll work your way up and you can actually make a living this way. Like, this is an honorable, great thing to do. So deregulation, but I think also cultural shifts and cutting off that free money. There's no way any rational human's going to go to work when they can just receive free money, unfortunately.
Right. So a follow-up with that would be, what is your idea to stop illegal immigration? In other words, how would you fix those root causes that we keep on hearing about?
Yeah, the root causes. The first and foremost one, President Trump was right. Build the wall, finish the wall. We already paid for it. Republicans like Jamie Herrera Butler, when we had control of the White House, we had the House, we had the Senate, they voted to stop construction of the border wall. And I went down there with Paul Gosar, Yuma, Arizona, and we saw where all of the materials that we paid for are laying out in the desert, collecting dust. Illegal immigrants are walking around it, over it, into our country. So build the wall, finish the wall is key. Something else that we can do is offensively use the threat of tariffs against South American countries that don't force their own borders, and then also threaten to withhold foreign aid to those countries. That's something that Trump did really quickly. He threatened, hey, I'm going to start tariffing everything coming from Mexico if you guys don't stop the caravans. Well, wouldn't you know it, the wall wasn't even built and the caravans stopped. So I think that's absolutely key. But then on our side of the border, I would even deploy the military down there, because I think what the cartel is doing, the way the cartel is taking over large swaths of the border, we have members of the Texas and Arizona National Guard that are getting shot at by the cartel, and they can't shoot back. Yet we have neocons in our national security state that want to send us over to go fight in Ukraine for some reason, but we have like a foreign country, a foreign terrorist organization shooting at our troops in the border. So I'd be just fine, as much of a non-war guy as I am, I would be just fine with us sending our military down there. On our side of the border, we have to get very tough on people that are hiring illegal immigrants, mandatory e-verify. We have to cut off illegal immigrants from any kind of social welfare benefit. We have to crack down on sanctuary cities, Portland, yes, Seattle, all these sanctuary cities. Like, there's no reason why these sanctuary cities should be receiving a penny of federal aid. Like, if they want to do their thing and not enforce any laws, that's fine, but our taxpayer dollars shouldn't be going to them. I think if we did that, if we made it impossible for most of the illegal immigrants who've come up, especially in this last wave, the 3 million that we think have come, most of these people, like, yeah, there's definitely some bad people. There's the cartel, there's the violence, there's stuff that makes the headlines, and rightfully so, because it's horrible. But most of these people are rational. They were told that, hey, they could get a decent paying job up in America, and we have a great social welfare system. If we cut those things off, they can't get jobs, they can't get access to our social welfare. I think a lot of them are just going to self-deport. Something else I think we have to do is we have to get rid of birthright citizenship. Like, I think you have to be born to an actual legal American for yourself to become an American, or go through our immigration process. The whole concept that you can just come here and have a baby, and then boom, the baby's an American, and then now we have the DACA thing, where we've created this, the kid becomes the golden ticket to coming in and becoming an American citizen. It's a really, it sounds nice when you say it, but it's really a perverse incentive for using a child to get across the border as your way to become an American. So I think getting rid of all those vectors right there is key for illegal immigration.
So you're a big states' rights guy, big 10th Amendment guy. What about some of these states and cities that are starting to allow illegals to vote? Yeah. Giving, like Oregon allows illegals to have a driver's license. I think Washington might too. Yeah. There's a couple states and municipalities around the country that are giving non-citizens citizen rights. They can't vote in federal elections, but like, who's going to count that? But so where does that line exist when it comes to, let's say, Oregon says, well, we want illegals to be able to vote, we want illegals to be able to do all these, get all the benefits. But is that a states' right issue, or is that a federal issue?
I don't think that's a states' rights issue at all. The states have a lot of leeway in what they can do, but when it comes to voting, especially in federal elections, or receiving any federal funds, I think there would have to be something where, Oregon or Washington or whatever state said that we're going to do all these things. We're going to let illegals essentially get social security numbers and vote. I think we would have to do something very draconian, like cutting off all the federal funding from them and just saying, like, no, you can't do that. And then we'd have to have some form of a discussion of, like, do we count this state's votes? I think that's very realistic. I think we need a national standard. I don't want the federal government to control federal elections. I want the states to still control that, but there does need to be some form of a national ID standard so that we know that actual eligible U.S. citizens are voting in our elections. The manner of how those elections are conducted, I think the states should have some leeway on, because I don't want HR1, SR1, where the federal government runs the whole thing, because that's essentially what happened in 2020. But yeah, so a federal national ID, I think, is a good way to go. But if the states are going to continue to really, I would say, assault the sovereignty of America, the federal government does have to push back. Cutting off funding would be the first one, but then even, I mean, if states are just going to start registering all these illegal immigrants to vote, like, do we count those votes? I don't know what the right answer there is, but it needs to be looked at.
Right. And my last question about the America First thing is, in there it says that marriage needs to be between one man and one woman only. Me personally, I think that government should get completely out of marriage. I think that we should have contracts. So like if two dudes want to have a contract that says, you know, if I'm in the hospital dying, then you can make my final decision. You know, pretty much what the government contract of marriage is. So I personally have a little kind of an issue with that, because I believe that government needs out of marriage. Like if two people want to hang out, it doesn't, or get the contract, more power to them. Sure. Live your life the way you want to, live and let live, kind of a thing. So what's really your stance on the marriage between one man and one woman on a legal standpoint? Because if you put that in a platform, that kind of sounds like somebody wants to make a law saying that marriage needs to be between a man and a woman. Yeah. And whereas me personally, I think marriage belongs in the church as a ceremony, and then the government just stays the heck out of it entirely.
Yeah, I actually, I've never been asked this before. I didn't include the marriage thing on my website. I would agree with you. I just don't see what the government has, other than a taxing purpose, what the government has to do with marriage. So if two people of the same sex want to get married, I really don't care. That's on the church. I don't think the federal government. I think the whole idea of going and getting a marriage license is really weird. Like, what are you doing with the marriage license? Like a car license or something like that? It's just, I don't know what the federal government, the state government, the local government has to do with it. So yeah, contracts I would agree with. I do think we need to defend. I think we need to defend, as far as the transgender issue goes, it does become a slippery slope, and so there are a lot of people on the conservative side that would say that all this drift started when we didn't defend marriage anymore, and we passed laws that people of the same sex could get married. I understand that argument. I just, like you, I want the government out of all that, but I think we need to defend male and female spaces and gender roles.
All right, and then I think I have two more questions left, and then we'll ask these wonderful people if they have any questions. What is your tax policy? Are you a fair tax guy where we have this flat, just national sales tax? Are you a flat tax guy, everybody pays the same percentage? Are you just keep it the way it is, or you go back to the constitutional bit where it's tariffs that pay for our stuff and there's no such thing as an income tax?
Give the free marketers a heart attack, and I would say I like the tariff model. The country did used to run off tariffs at the federal level. Like we're very overtaxed right now as it is, in states and local areas. Mike's kicking my butt. So I like the idea of a consumption-based tax as well. I think sales taxes are okay because they don't. Right now if you own property, you're paying a lot more for property that you already own. You already bought. It doesn't make much sense to me. But I like the tariff concept. I think in a time where we need to start bringing back more of our manufacturing, I think it's worth trying. I mean, our founders intended it to be that way. That wouldn't stop counties, that wouldn't stop states from taxing their people, unfortunately. But as far as federal taxes go, tariffs could work. If they didn't, then I think something like a consumption-based tax, flat tax is a decent idea as well for people that are making above poverty level.
So my last question is, you talked about the 2020 riots quite a bit. For those of you here who don't know who I am, I'm the common sense conservative. I used to go down and film the riots all the time. I go all over the country filming Antifa and Patriot events and so on. So my question is, I've been attacked down there multiple times. I'd have to completely hide my identity, go down as Black Bloc. I'd have to look like Antifa just to survive. Sometimes they found me. They stabbed one of my other reporters that were down there, almost killed him. They shot a friend of mine, which a lot of you might have heard about. So the federal government, Trump was president, but the federal government didn't really do anything really to keep the peace. I mean, Trump asked to, bring in the National Guard, but he said, okay, well, it's really up to you, to do your thing. So my question is let's say 2024, Antifa decides to go, well, we're not happy that Republicans got the supermajority. Fingers crossed, right? And they, and so they start rioting again. They start doing this stuff again. What are you going to do for me? Just as a journalist, just somebody who's going out and filming events and so on. Like I have to, most of the times when I go to events anymore nowadays, I have to wear armor. I'm usually armed because I have people like coming after me. I have the media calling me all sorts of wonderful things like a Nazi and all this good stuff, developing all these people, putting me on like kill lists and so on. So when you get to that federal level, and this isn't just a local thing, this is all over the country. People who go out and they wear, this patch on their hat and they go out and they film stuff, where a lot of us are in danger. So what would you do to kind of help stop the danger so much? Because I mean, it's not just a local issue, it's a federal, I think personally it's a federal issue.
Yeah. Well, Antifa and BLM, they're domestic terrorists, or at least organized crime. And they cross state lines frequently, and they do it with impunity, and they hide in places like Portland and Seattle, and they receive sanctuary. They're literally a sanctuary city. So a part of that holding the national security state to account, I think there needs to be an accounting of why the FBI, why the U.S. Marshals, and why federal prosecutors weren't going after members of Antifa, of BLM, that were repeat offenders, that were doing these things in an interstate fashion and in accordance with domestic terrorism, wherever they were receiving their funding from. I would want to hold them accountable and then empower them, because I'm sure a lot of the guys on the ground level, like these U.S. Marshals, would love nothing more to do than defend their territory and effectively go after some of these members of Antifa. I talk to guys that are in the Seattle PD or the Portland PD all the time, and they know exactly who these Antifa people are. It's not like, oh man, we can't, Antifa just appears at dark and then they disappear. Like, they know who these guys are. They've arrested them multiple times. They simply don't get charged. I think if there was one big round of charging some of the leaders, a lot of this would go away, especially if people started going away to jail for 10, 15, 20 years for a lot of the aggravated assaults, attempted murders, in many cases murders that transpired. So, I mean, the answer is clear. We just have to enforce law and order. Again, I mean, Jamie Herr Butler, she says she's tough on law enforcement. She didn't go for the southern border wall, and then also when Antifa was killing people literally in Portland, marching into the district, right past her district office in Vancouver, assaulting people, she said nothing until it was time to vote with Democrats to stop Trump from deploying federal resources to actually quell the violence. So that's, I mean, violence, I dealt with violence a lot professionally. Violence doesn't just go away. If violence continues to spread, it will continue until it is checked by more violence or more force, or the threat of force. And right now, that's absent.
All right. That's all the questions that I have. Does anybody in the audience have any questions for him? And then I'll just, if you can say it, and then I'll repeat it, just so everybody who's watching can hear it. And then,
do you want the mic? Would that help?
No, I probably shouldn't do that. They recently, in the state of Washington, a judge has ruled that they cannot, special forces cannot train in state parks and state lands. And I don't know if there's a question in this, but just interested in your comments on it.
Yeah, so he asked about the special, I think in particular it was the SEALs up north training in national parks. I spent 20 years in the special operations. We train in a lot of cities, we train in a lot of national parks as well. I think that's just specifically targeting the military for some reason. I don't know why. If it's on federal land, like the National Park Service, I don't think the state can actually intervene there, would be my guess. If it's a state park, then yeah, they can keep them out. But I really just think it's kind of much to do about nothing. This type of training's been going on for a very long time. So it's just Washington State not liking the military, unfortunately.
Well, not all Washington State.
Not Washington State legislation, excuse me. Olympia. Yeah.
anybody else have any questions? Go ahead.
Yeah, in 2016, we had Trump was impeached a lot. And how come we're not impeaching Biden right now?
We don't have a majority. So we don't have enough votes to actually make it happen. But when we take back the House, we take back the Senate, or at least take back the House in January of 23, MTG's impeachment paperwork goes forward and we start those hearings. Because we won't have any excuse, because the American people know that between inviting the assault on our southern border, leaving troops on the battlefield in Afghanistan, we should impeach this guy. Same thing with Kamala Harris for the Antifa riots. Like, it has to happen. And so I think this is something that people are going to fight. It's going to heavily divide the country, but it has to happen.
Because many of America is really red. Most of America is really red, and I don't get it.
Go ahead.
So, okay.
You first.
Okay, so mine is about education. When you were talking about the grooming and stuff, that's something that I've been doing a lot of research on. And from a former Planned Parenthood person who has owned their own, had said that they literally go in, starting in kindergarten, plant the seed, go back again, second or third grade, plant more seeds, go back again when our children are in middle school. By this time, they're trying to get them to be promiscuous. And it's all so they can make the money. I am very upfront about how I am pro-life. I want to know what would be in your capability, what you would do to go about that, because it's not just the abortions that they're working on as well. It's they just really want to stop children, kind of a thing. And they're grooming them as well. So then when I think about, like, a kindergartner should not have to sit there and wonder, well, gee, I wonder if I'm a male or a female, even though I was born with a penis.
Yep.
So I'm just kind of curious as to what you would do with that, and what would be in your hands that you could do with that.
So with Congress not funding Planned Parenthood, I mean, Planned Parenthood, they get some charity money, but they get a lot of money from the federal government. It's tied up in these horrible omnibus bills, because they know if they brought it forward as a standalone resolution, that no Republican, and a lot of Democrats too, wouldn't be able to vote for it because their constituents would eat them alive. Instead, they stick it in the middle of a 2,000-page bill, omnibus passed in the dead of the night, tied up with every other little goodie that we want for the district. So when Jamie Hurrah Butler comes back to the district and says, like, I built a swimming pool in Pacific County and I got money for salmon runs, and that's all great, and that's what she's running on, she's really running on Planned Parenthood, the Planned Parenthood omnibus. So I think when I come back and I'm on the bad guy list because I didn't sign up on the omnibus bill, that's me trying to fight Planned Parenthood and that agenda. Same thing with all their federal grants. There's so many different ways that these organizations that are either brainwashing our kids or funding abortions, those types of things, that they're getting federal funding. We just have to know exactly what the money that we're allocating does, and if we need to not authorize it or not. And most of it, none of this is in the Constitution. Like, the federal government shouldn't be messing with it anyways. It's really a big power thing. It's eugenics. I mean, really, if you look at, we can call it racist all the time. However, Planned Parenthood, the founding of abortion was designed to keep minority populations at bay. It's sick and disgusting. It's still in place. It's sick and it's disgusting. And then the whole transgender ideology that's being sown through the Planned Parenthood sex ed and all that, that's designed just complete total control. Because if you can make people if you can make parents give their children up to the states and indoctrinate them, and you can change the definitions of what a man is or what a woman is, if you can tell me that no, that's not a man, that's not a woman, and make me say exactly what you want to say, you have complete total control. And that's all that this is about. It's all CRT, the Planned Parenthood agenda, the trans agenda. It's all total control, because the end state for these globalists is complete total authoritarian control. So my short answer is just kill off all the funding.
I like that, and I also like that you said to get back to education. I'm a mom who had to teach her children how to write cursive because they weren't learning it in school. I'm like, are you kidding me?
Yeah.
I learned in like second grade and had to do it all the way through.
But they can tell you what a pronoun was.
Exactly.
Right?
You're gonna make Bill Gates mad.
Go ahead.
I'm under the belief that Congress functions very strongly under a seniority system and a monetary system. And if you don't have those two things, you're not going to get on a committee that matters for a damn, and they're not going to let you vote just because you want to follow the Constitution. They're going to put you in a corner somewhere and control you. How do you plan to have the effectiveness if you try to walk the Constitution, which is what I'd love to see, but how are you gonna get around that?
Repeat that one.
Yeah, so fair question. He said, he pointed out that Congress runs on a seniority system, and then also with heavy financial incentives, like you need to be raising money for the party to get put on a good committee. And if you're not on a good committee, you're essentially powerless. However, every congressman still gets to actually vote during, whether or not bills are gonna get passed or not. I think what you pointed out has been the system up until recently. I think that system is getting more and more eroded every day. I think what Marjorie Taylor Greene, what Matt Gaetz, what Paul Gosar have done when they've been in a little bit of hot water. I mean, when MTG came into Congress, she got kicked off of all of her committees day one, and she was just supposed to go sit in a corner somewhere and be quiet, but instead, she went out and she started going to every single different committee meeting. She was using parliamentary procedures, calling for roll call votes, and then just using the power of social media to let her constituents and the American people know what happened. And when she did that, she got empowered by the people, because then she became this fundraising behemoth off of small individual contributions. So she did two things. She shattered the seniority, but then she also shattered the financial, because she's one of the top fundraisers in the GOP right now, and she doesn't rely on the corporate donors. I think the corporate donors are coming to her and trying to get associated with her now, but that's a great way for them to break free. Paul Gosar does he does an almost 180 out from that. He's very quiet. He understands exactly how laws are passed and laws are made, and he doesn't raise a ton of money, but he's still very effective because he knows how Congress works, and he's vocal when it counts. I mean, Matt Gaetz does a lot of the same type of stuff too. So I personally think not taking any corporate PAC money, only being accountable to the people in the district is how we break free from that. And I'll need your guys' help. I'll have to come back here to these districts and say, hey guys, I need $5, $10, $15 from you to keep myself afloat over there in Congress, just to have enough money to beat the Democrats next cycle. And then also the GOP will take me seriously, because what MTG did, she was able to make the donor class of the GOP have to listen to her. And she did that by doing the will of the people in Congress. So I think we have to go to the seniority system. I think we're starting to shake free from a lot of that. It's refreshing. It needs to happen, because if we're going to rely on guys like Kevin McCarthy and these same old Republicans that have been there for 15, 20 years, Jamie, we know they're not going to save our country. I mean, I'll probably say this again at some point tonight, but the Republican Party has won more elections than we've lost in the last 30 years. And in that time, we've lost the country. So we have to really start thinking anew about a lot of things. The seniority thing is one of them, and then just breaking free from the corporate donor classes is another.
Thank you.
Anybody else have any more questions? I do have one more question. Somebody did ask on the live stream, what is your opinion of the Proud Boys? Do you, a lot of people in the media call them domestic terrorists, just like we call Antifa domestic terrorists. What is your opinion of them, and even the 3%ers, for instance? Do you have an opinion?
If someone does something violent or illegal against that, if you show up and you protest, which is in accordance with the Constitution, you're more than welcome to do that. And you can wear a hat that says Proud Boys, you can wear a hat that says whatever. You can even wear a hat that says Antifa, as long as you're not assaulting people and doing horrible things. Like, I'm fine with it. So, I mean, really, people who break the law, I don't like and assault people. If you're out there exercising your First Amendment rights and you're doing it in a peaceful way, like, more power to you. I support that.
Sweet. Cool. Well, if nobody else has any more questions, and one more question. Go ahead.
So, I know a lot of it has to do with our local government as well, but I was sitting at the city council meeting, and there's a gentleman that we are paying way too much money for him to do this research. Anyways, he relayed that Jamie has money, like $5.5 million to go to Washington, but it's in red because it hasn't been solidified yet. But she doesn't come, she never comes here. I don't know when she last came by. And this is money that's supposed to go to Longview, and she deemed it to go to the Columbia Heights region. Then they're like, oh yeah, you can go to the Highlands. I live in the Highlands. I speak very out about it and everything. But my thing is what could you do in that situation? I mean, can you only deem it for this area, or could you be like, yes, and split it up?
I'm not 100% sure exactly what funding you're talking about, but in general, like Jamie's on the appropriations committee, and as far as committees go, this is Jamie's argument, is that she's on the appropriations committee, she can get money allocated for Washington. Again, that ties her to this omnibus situation in most cases. So the $5 million that she's gonna get, and I'm not saying that these communities don't need different projects, they most certainly do, but was it worth $1.5 trillion that funded Planned Parenthood that infringements on our Second Amendment rights? So I'll be saying no to a lot of that. So, however, but when time comes, what I want to do is I want to be able to use the town halls as my ways of talking with people to see where the problems are. And we'll have to make hard decisions, and I want to be able to make everybody happy, but it should be transparent. It shouldn't be this thing that Jamie, who's our representative, who's supposed to represent all of us, she just came and she talked to one or two people that are, key decision makers in these city councils, and she said, well, I have a couple $1 million. And then we're left to go like, well, that's our couple $1 million. Like, we paid our taxes. What do you mean? Like, why didn't we have a group discussion about this? This is the reason why representatives represent the people back in Washington, D.C., and we're only supposed to represent, whatever it is, 750,000, and it's broken down that way. It's a lot of people, but we can come and have honest discussions. And, every now and again, you're not always going to be 100% informed because the government's big and moves fast. But Jamie hasn't done an in-person town hall in 6 years.
I was gonna say,
So,
she's been around.
I think most of this should be a discussion. Like, you guys should know exactly when I'm throwing around millions of dollars in Congress, that's all of our money. If you guys want access to that information and you want to have a conversation or at least hear me talk about it, there should be a venue where you can come, if you're willing to drive out to one of the counties I'm gonna be at, and I'll try to be in every county while I'm on legislative break at least once. That should be something that's very accessible to you, as opposed to what we have right now. It's all very murky right now. Jamie's on the appropriations committee. She does things with millions of dollars with very important people. Not you guys, not us. She can't come talk to us. Every now and again, she'll go on Mars, like maybe once every 6 months. But I mean, that's just completely and totally unacceptable. Like, none of this should be that murky.
So you mean you're actually going to represent the people?
I'm gonna do my best.
Wow.
And if I don't, fine.
That's crazy. I've never seen anything like that before, so
It's radical.
that would be pretty cool. All right, well, if nobody has any, got another question. I'm just going to keep saying that. It's awesome.
That's how you fish them out, yeah.
So it seems like the House of Representatives should constitutionally have the most power out of all the branches because they control the purse strings. And there's so many institutions like the CDC and the FBI and the CIA, they don't work for the American people. Yep. They're corrupt. They were formed after the 1871 Banking Act of England. So is there anything you can do as just not being on the appropriations committee as far as trying to either totally defund these agencies or make sure that they have less money because they seem to just be growing in power and they won't act in our interests anymore?
So oversight's a big one, where we can actually show the American people that, hey, this is the corruption that's taking place. So those January 6th for the FBI and the DOJ, the Russiagate, the abuses of FISA with the CIA and some of the other intelligence agencies, I think is absolutely key. Accounting for the Afghan war, the war on terror, those lies, the DOD. I think that's huge, and there's a lot of bloat in all those organizations, and we have to hold people accountable. We have to fire them. In some cases, we have to take security clearances. That type of stuff actually, it has to happen. I mean, I went in the military under Bill Clinton. I served all the way through President Trump. I saw multiple transitions of power. When Trump came in, because Trump was an assault to the administrative state, he was an assault on Wall Street, he was an assault on really just our entire permanent ruling class. The architecture within the Department of Defense, the State Department, where I was at, the CIA, and the intelligence community, mid to senior level leaders had no issues saying that, like, oh, we don't have to do what the president says, which is completely against the Constitution. And so there is a culture there within our administrative state that these people, they just know the best, like some people call it the deep state, whatever. It's really a bunch of administrators who think, hey, I outlast every single administration. I know better than these leaders. Well, these leaders are elected by the people. That's not the way the Constitution is supposed to work. So I do think we have to go through a big period of cleansing a lot of these organizations, getting rid of some where necessary, and actually holding people to account. Once we get Trump back in 2024, a piece of legislation that's key that we need to pass is something called Schedule F. There's a couple different categories of federal employees, but basically Schedule F means the executive branch can fire federal employees. The executive branch controls federal employees, but right now they're unionized, they're corporatized. It's really hard to get fired from the federal government, believe it or not. And that's what a lot of these people like Fauci are counting on. Like Fauci's a great guy because we all know, he's not a great guy, he's a horrible guy. But Fauci's a great example because we all know Fauci, we've seen the horrible things that Fauci has done. But let me tell you, for every one Fauci, there's like 5 or 6 that we don't know about. They're probably making almost as much money that are doing just as much damage as the government because they know that they can outlast every single administration. So a key program like Schedule F that puts an actual presidential appointee in the room for any policy decisions that are being made and the ability to immediately fire people by the executive branch, I think is key. Between that and oversight, we can start to combat the administrative state. Something else too that's huge is that the America First movement, grassroots people, we need to start getting more involved with government, not just at the local level, but also at the federal level. The big reason why the administrative state was able to really do so much damage to President Trump was because we didn't have 1,000 to 2,000 people ready to go day one to go work in all these different departments. And so we had to rely on a bunch of people from like, the Bush era, or even keep a bunch of the old Obama people who absolutely despised everything Trump stood for and fought him tooth and nail for 4 years.
Well, it seems like when you finally do get these people in front of Congress, and there are some people that ask some good questions, and they actually get these people to lie, nothing ever happens.
Yep.
It's just, they just go back, there's no accountability at all.
They have to be held to account. I mean,
Who's the last person that got fired? That's correct.
Yeah, off the top of my head, I have no idea. I don't know. I hope Durham keeps doing the work that he's doing and we get some accountability there. But Fauci's a great one. I mean, Rand Paul basically has him dead to rights on multiple occasions, lying to him. And so, I mean, Rand Paul is trying to pursue holding him in contempt. And so I think that's a good one to start with. And then these guys that lied about the whole Hunter Biden's laptop and they still have security clearances, like those guys need to be held accountable as well. I know a lot of them are private citizens, but taking away their security clearances, I think, would be huge.
Well, it's frustrating because the DOJ, in my opinion, is the heart of the swamp because they're covering everything up.
Yeah,
And you can present everything you want to the AG, he's not going to do anything.
that's right.
So how do you change that? So,
Yeah, rigorous oversight and then actually holding people accountable. Because the thing is, and I say this as a guy who proudly worked in the CIA, like if we don't start holding these institutions accountable, the American people just won't trust them anymore. Then what's the purpose of these institutions? There should not be an adversarial relationship between we the people and these institutions. Like we should be, having our kids go into these institutions to serve our country. It should be a noble thing. Deep in my heart, I still believe it is a noble thing for most people that are there. That's why it's incumbent upon us to make sure that we're getting rid of the bad apples that are working for the institutions and not the Constitution.
hopefully you have a Speaker of the House that's not a rhino, because you had Paul Ryan last time.
Yep.
And it's like he's
I
blocked
think
so
that
many
was the
things.
same.
Speaker Trump. Yeah.
Yeah.
Speaker Trump.
Speaker Trump, man. Yeah.
Why if the Speaker of the House gets in control and goes out on the floor?
Yep.
It should be you get like 100 signatures and you can debate something.
I-
You have this one, you have all these Speaker of the Houses, throughout the country, even at a state level.
Yep.
They're so corrupt, like the guy in Wisconsin, he's blocking all the election
Oh,
fraud.
yeah.
Mhm.
And so, what kind of system is that? You're supposed to be working for the people. Why do we need that?
We need to remind them, don't we?
Yeah.
Amen.
Loudly and clearly.
Starts with Jamie in August.
You had a question?
Yes, good evening. We need to get this Jamie person out of there, but there's more than one person besides yourself that is going to go against this person. How can we consolidate it instead of splitting up the vote and getting everything all muddled up? Is there any ideas of how to get people together to get you elected and get her out of there?
Yeah, so how do we consolidate the vote is his question, because in this state we have a jungle primary system, and at no point in time do all the Republicans line up on one ticket and vote on which Republican we want to go face off against the Democrat. Washington, as you guys all know, it is weird. A lot of folks, unfortunately, in Washington don't realize that we have that system. So about a year ago, more than a year ago at this point, after Jamie cast her impeachment vote, there was a handful of us that threw our names in the hat and said, hey, we're going to go after Jamie Herrera Butler. We all privately and publicly agreed that whoever Trump endorsed, the rest of us would rally behind in an effort to consolidate the Republican Party. So on the stage at Clark County Candidate Forum, myself, Heidi St. John, and Wadi Accord made that pledge. We said whoever Trump endorsed, the rest of us would drop out, rally behind, so that we, the people, could overthrow the establishment. So worked as hard as they could, got the Trump endorsement by September, so 6 months of hard work. Everybody had not had the ability to influence Trump's decision making. All of us had a different line. into the Trump world. I was honored to receive President Trump's endorsement, but I can tell you right now, had I not gotten Trump's endorsement, I would not be sitting here right now. 1 year core, he's a man of his word, fellow veteran. He immediately dropped right out like he said he would. Unfortunately, Heidi St. John decided to stay in the race, and she spends most of her time attacking me, which, hey, it is what it is. It's politics. Right now, according to every independent poll that's been done in the district, I'm leading against Heidi by double digits, but then also I'm beating Jamie Herrera Butler. The problem is, though, with other people getting into the race, every point does really count. Jamie right now is 100% relying on corporate special PAC money, special interest group money. She takes money from Johnson & Johnson, from Big Pharma, from every single major corporation that's benefited from shipping our jobs overseas, benefited from the pandemic. That's her strategy, and she's still getting funded by the establishment, by Kevin McCarthy, because she said to the establishment, look, these fringy people, that's what Jamie calls us, these fringy people are gonna fight amongst themselves, and I'll still be able on name recognition alone to get enough votes to slide into the general election. It'll be her against the Democrat. We'll all be forced, once again, to vote for Jamie. That's 100% her calculation. So something very significant happened after Jamie made her impeachment vote. Every single county in the district, including Cowlitz County, with the exception of Pacific, which is our least populated county, either formally censured Jamie or they at least said that they would hear from other candidates, which is very, very rare to hear from other candidates when there's a sitting Republican incumbent. So what we, the people, did was we told Jamie, we're done with you, we're not gonna listen to you anymore. We became insurgents, and the party backed Jamie. The party didn't go with we the people, the party started working against us. Kevin McCarthy, the GOP, they're working against us. So as insurgents, and I spent my career fighting insurgents or funding insurgents, insurgencies that are not united, they get snuffed out. If there's divisions within the ranks of the insurgents, they're so easy to deal with. However, insurgencies that are united are impossible to squash out by a higher power. This is modern warfare 101. So if there is any way that we can unite the party, and this is why I'm so adamant about that, is that we need to unite the party. I mean it when I say I wouldn't be sitting here right now had I not gotten Trump's endorsement, because there's no way in hell I would do Kevin McCarthy and the GOP and the swamp the favor of staying in the race and deleting the vote. So if there's anyone you know that's on the fence and they want to talk to me, they don't trust me, they think I'm a CIA plant or something like that, like, have them come to a town hall, have them grill me, I'll come to them. The most important thing that we do is unify the party and just get rid of the establishment.
There's a guy in New Jersey who's in the GOP, and I think he had like $800 in his campaign. He was a truck driver.
Yep.
And he upseated some guy that had been there forever. So I don't know if you guys ever called his office to figure out what he did right.
He unified the party. No, he really did. That's one of the big things he did. He had grassroots support, and there was a lot of unification because that incumbent there was comfortable, and he just didn't go back and talk to the people. Like he got snanked by a guy who didn't spend any money because the people were sick of the incumbent.
We'll go with you first, just because you haven't asked one yet, and then we'll get you right after.
So my question is about the omnibus
Yeah.
spending packages, because it's a conglomeration of a bunch of different stuff that has nothing to do with the other stuff.
Right.
So, and it's all by design to get stuff ramrodded through and all part of the wrangling. So how would you go about trying to dismantle that where you hear individual bills?
Yep.
Because, I mean, that's a long establishment plan to spend all this money and send it off and, you know, play all the shell games they do. How would you even attempt to dismantle a Leviathan so big that's, you know, I mean, which I would love to see it dismantled.
Yep.
You know, it's part of cutting spending.
Yep. I mean, the power of negation, the power of saying no, because they're relying on people wanting to get their pork put into the omnibus so they can continue getting funding from the various lobbying groups, from the special interest groups. If I'm being funded by we the people, I'm accountable to you guys. I can tell you right now, I'm just not signing off on the omnibus bill. There could be some of like the greatest pieces of legislation ever in that omnibus bill, but if it's the size of 2 phone books and it gets put on my desk 4 hours before we're supposed to vote on it, and we do the Pelosi thing where it's like you have to pass the bill to see what's in the bill, like I can't do that because God only knows what's in the bill. And it's fiscally just incredibly irresponsible. And so then I think when we actually present legislation, and this might be more towards once we have President Trump in office, once we present legislation, I think it needs to be standalone legislation. I think it needs to be simple enough that someone can pick up the bill and not have to have a law degree or deeply steeped in legislation and read it and say, oh, this is a bill that does this thing. It's going to cost this much money. I think that's fairly easy to do on a few pages. And there's no reason other than trying to hide things from the American people to do these massive omnibus bills. And so what it's going to do is it's going to slow down the wheels of government a lot by saying no to the omnibus package. And I think we need that. And I think we actually need to have congressmen doing live streams and saying, like, this is what's in this bill. Like, this is ridiculous, you know, or come back to the districts and saying, like, I brought a copy of the bill, guys. Like, here's what's in this thing, and this is why I voted no. Like, I think that just has to happen for the sake of the republic.
Well, one guy is just one guy,
Yeah.
and I guess you have to get other people on board with you that,
Yep.
you know, if you're bought up, you know, it's not easy to solve, but I just, wanted to ask that, so.
No, it's a mess. All the easy answers are, I think, 20 years behind us. I think everything right from here going forward until we actually like get above water as a country, it's going to be a hard fight. And I think every time it's going to be a hard fight with everything we want to get done or everything we want to stop from being done to us.
Well,
What are your thoughts regarding our most recent Supreme Court justice?
I mean, speaking of grooming, I mean, it's sick. I mean, literally, I thought initially when Biden selected this woman that it was like, okay, he wanted to pick an African-American woman. Like, okay, fine, she went to Harvard, she's got all the right qualifications. Like, maybe I won't agree. Maybe she'll try to legislate from the bench, which is what the more progressive justices like to do. I had no idea. I was just as shocked probably as all of you guys were. God bless Josh Hawley for doing the work that he did. The Article 3 nonprofit, I think it's Article 3 nonprofit group that went through her record, and her record is appalling. I mean, I don't know what kind of a person gives leniency consistently to people that are preying on children. Like, it blows my mind. It just shows how so much of this progressive agenda is trying to exert control. Because again, if you can gain control over people and change the definition of what a man and a woman is, or you can tell them that, like, yeah, your most primal basic instinct might be to hate pedophilia, but then you have really good mind control over people, and that's what this is, I think. I think this is just part of the plan. Maybe deep in her heart, she does believe that she needs to have leniency on these people, that she's just 100% turn the cheek type of person. She shouldn't be in the job that she's in if that's the way that she feels in the core of her being. So I was appalled by it. I would like to move to impeach her from the Supreme Court once we get there, because I just don't think we can have people that are lenient on child molesters. And if this is a thing, if this is a trend, I think we need to start going through a lot more of these federal justices' records to find out, like, are there justices that have a history of going extremely light on people that are preying on children? I mean, this is not something radical. It's not a radical right position that we shouldn't prey on children. Like, the levels that our country's fallen to with that, and to see the different sides split up, and to see some people on the altar of partisan politics just blindly get behind somebody who, in any other circumstance, I don't think they would defend the actions of. I think most Democrats, if you ask them, you know, your Democrat neighbor, your Democrat friend, like, would you be lenient on someone who is dealing child pornography? I don't think any of them in their right mind would say yes. Like, this is something far more diabolical and just nefarious that's taking over our country.
Republicans have voted for.
And there's Republican, yeah, Mitt Romney. I mean, the great moral stalwart, Mitt Romney. Yeah, when they're not too busy trying to get us into the next war, telling us we still need to wear our masks, they're approving the child molester. The lady who lets child molesters go, excuse me, she's not a child molester, she's lenient on child molesters.
Well, if you haven't heard it, I hope you get to hear Ron Wyden on the radio degrading the Republicans for asking her, what is a woman? Who would be so low as to do that? Oh my God.
Sounds like wine.
Yeah.
All right, so while everybody in here was asking some questions, I did get a couple more.
Okay.
So the first question was, what do you think, or how do you feel about some governors recently saying that if any illegals come into their state, they're going to be busing them to Delaware and or Washington, D.C.?
It's pretty awesome. Yeah, I mean, some of this might be like a political performance that they're doing, but hey, man, if we're gonna do that kind of political performance, that probably needs to happen. I would prefer they just bust them right back across the southern border. But to make a point, because the Biden administration has been flying people to random spots of the country, when I was down there at the border, I mean, they were busing people into the interior of the country, the border patrol wasn't wherever they couldn't do anything about it. So yeah, I think it's great. Hopefully, Jay Inslee doesn't start fighting more here.
Yeah. What about term limits?
I've already signed the pledge for term limits. I don't plan on doing this for a career. That's my personal life, but also I think the reason why we're in the state that we're in right now is that we let people go to Washington, D.C. I think once you start getting up to 8-10 years, you need to leave the swamp and go somewhere else, run for a different office, go back to private life. I mean, we put really clear restraints on the executive branch, but for some reason, the guys who make the law never made a law about how long they can be there. I mean, I think Jamie may have been an okay representative. I don't think she was ever like a fire breather for us, but I think maybe for her first, couple terms, she was probably okay. Once you hit 10 years there, you've been in DC for way too long. You just need to go. So for me, I plan on doing it for 3 different terms of 6 years, 2 years to fight the Biden administration, and then 4 years to give Trump a congressman he deserves.
What about the Electoral College? It's been a topic of debate and discussion. I mean, you look at any election map of the United States, it's a very solid red map with a couple blue dots everywhere, and a lot of people, well, of course, people on the left want to get rid of the Electoral College and allow New York and California to decide all elections, and then some people on the right have been bringing up different ideas on like maybe get a state like Washington and divide it up into 5 little parts. Like each state have their own electoral college, so Seattle doesn't control the whole rest of the entire red state that we live in. Same with Portland and Oregon. So where do you kind of stand on the electoral college? Leave it as it is, or maybe change it up a little bit?
I would say leave it as it is. If we start opening it up and saying let's make some modifications here and there, that might not turn out the way that we want it to. So I would defend it at all costs. Our founders were geniuses. They knew even back then that they didn't want a couple major cities controlling the entire nation. So I think it's key to defend. If we ever get a foothold in the governor's mansion or in the Washington state legislature, I would say presenting some form of a statewide electoral college would be awesome. But I wouldn't want to regulate that from the federal government.
Awesome. How are you going to help Washington? Like, we've talked a lot about the, going to federal this, federal that,
Yep.
But you're going to be a Washington state representative. How are you going to help all of us?
Yeah, so bringing back our manufacturing, I think the 3rd Congressional District, we can be, I think, one of the beacons and champions of like the America First industrial revolution, for lack of a better term. At one point in time, our district, between the timber industry, between the fishing industry, between having energy sources with our rivers, ports on our rivers, we could be an absolute behemoth of manufacturing because we have access to the Pacific Ocean, we have access to all these ports. Our timber industry is heavily underused right now, bringing back the manufacturing, bringing back our actual lumber and timber processing, and just responsible forestry, and then same thing with the fishing industry, revitalizing that. We also have the potential here as far as like our actual intellectual talent and our the architecture that we have here to bring back the tech industry. There was a time when semiconductors and advanced microchips were made in the district, and a lot of that capability got shipped overseas to Taiwan. That's why Taiwan is so important. It comes up in some different conversations. We could bring a ton of that back here in the district. And those are high-tech jobs that people that are going and getting those tech degrees could actually benefit from. A lot of these are going to be big muscle lifts, but I think they absolutely have to happen for the sake of our country. But I think we have a great combination here of what nature blessed us with in this district, and so also our infrastructure is absolutely key. The I-5 bridge issue down in Clark County, really for all of us, it's a hot button issue because that bridge is extremely old, 205 is a ways away, it's a massive bottleneck, and what's horrible is it's I-5, it's a clear federal nexus because it's interstate commerce, from Mexico all the way to Canada. However, the way that this has been handled has been horrible. They're letting Clark County and Multnomah County fight it out. The federal government will come in every now and again. Jamie got a couple $1 million allocated that has to be given back. There's no federal leadership there. I don't think in instances like that where there's clear-cut federal interstate commerce that 2 counties should be fighting over it. The county should definitely have a say in what happens because it's their physical property, but there actually needs to be federal leadership and federal funding that comes in to improve that. And I feel the same thing about our ports. And if we're going to bring back a lot of this manufacturing too, I think having the federal government come in to do some of the initial heavy lifts, and then also the corporate tax incentives to bring these industries back. Law and order is another big one. I mean, right now, I think in Washington State, we're always going to be in this bad position. I hope the whole state changes, but where we're going to need really bold Republicans in the few places that we have Republicans. Because Olympia right now, what they've done with the policing bill, as a federal congressman, I can't change the way that Olympia passes absolutely insane bills. But what I can do is I can go after the sanctuary cities, cut off their federal funding. I can also reward with law enforcement grants that I'm not giving to places like Portland, Olympia, and Seattle. I can give those federal law enforcement grants to sheriff's departments that are doing their best, sheriffs that are elected by we the people, that are constitutional sheriffs that are trying to enforce law and order, help them stay above and enforce some basic law and order, or even have the marshals, the FBI come in to do some form of law and order in times of crisis.
Awesome. Anybody else have any questions? Going. All right. Last question, and then I'll just let you close it out after that. So a couple people have called you a rhino.
Oh, already?
What would you say to them? Yeah, already. Yep.
Oh, yeah, that's a new one to me. I don't know why I'm a rhino already. So no, I'm an America First guy. Like I got really disenchanted with the Republican slave to the free market, ship all of our jobs overseas, go fight endless wars, and have unchecked legal and illegal immigration. I got really sick of that in the Bush era, became a Ron Paul guy. Trump brought me, when Trump took over the Republican Party, he brought me back to the Republican Party. So I first got active in politics by speaking out on behalf of Trump's foreign policy, which was an affront to the GOP establishment foreign policy, which we're seeing play out right now with Ukraine and Russia. So I am very much a populist nationalist, America First, Trump supporter. Really can't stand much about the GOP. I'm anti-Kevin McCarthy. I'm not going to vote for him. I don't know what to say to that other than if I don't do what I say, once I get into Congress, then primary me and get rid of me.
That's a good enough answer for me.
Yeah.
Is there anything you want to tell these wonderful people or the people who are watching?
Really just thanks for coming out. If this is the first time you've heard from me, go to joekentforcongress.com, check the events tab. We're coming to a town hall near you. If we're not, then let us know, joe@joekentforcongress.com. Email us and let us know where you'd like us to come. Any group of people that want to hear from me, that want to ask me questions, I'll even come to you. It's important that we unify the party. It's important that we send a clear message to the swamp and to the establishment that we the people are in charge and not our ruling class any longer. So joekentforcongress.com is the place for more information. So, and then thank all of you for coming out as always.
One last question. Are you and Heidi gonna have a debate?
That's such a good question.
That would be
So
awesome.
funny you ask. So I did extend a invitation to Joe, and that's actually how we connected.
You're looking at it right now.
And
I see she showed up.
I sent one to her, and she just ignored it. She didn't even say no. She was just nope. And I've had people from who are campaigning for her, and I've brought it up. They're like, "Well, how can you talk about Joe Kent?" And I'm like, "Well, he's the only one who's talking to me." So, I mean, what do you want? Like, I offered to host a debate. The offer still stands. I'm sure Joe is more than happy and willing to do so.
Yep.
But yeah, they don't want to.
My policy, and I said this to Jamie Herrera Butler too when I got a chance to briefly speak with her over Zoom, of course.
I saw that.
I will clear my schedule for any debate. Heidi today on a live stream said that she wouldn't debate until after filing in May, after committing and bailing out of multiple debates. So that's unfortunate because these are important times and these are important discussions to have. But I will clear my schedule to debate anyone, any place, anytime. I said that to Jamie too.
Okay. I saw your telegram where you, it was your campaign manager, the letter about that.
Yeah.
Didn't she challenge you to a debate and then cancel?
She sure did, yeah. I mean, well, Lars kind of put her on the spot. And when Lars said, "Would you debate Joe Kent?" She said, "Yeah, absolutely." I was on the next day, and Lars said, "Will you debate Heidi?" I said, "Yes." We've been through this dance before. This is the first time it happened on air. And then she comes back and says that she's not going to debate. She didn't want to debate over the phone. We said, fine. Skamania County GOP offered to host a debate.
Yeah.
She went back and said no. Robert offered up this in-person / live stream debate. So it's a saga. I mean, it goes back to, we were trying to get debates going in October. After she said that she wasn't going to drop out, we said, fine, let's do a debate. Let's give the people access to all the information. So And then I said the same thing to Jamie. I said it on Mars. I said it on Zoom in Clark County. Like she tells me the time and place, and she can even pick the moderator, and I'll show up. So it's funny because Jamie and Heidi have consistently refused to debate. However, the Democrat that's in the race, Brent Henrich, who I disagree with on pretty much absolutely everything, every time that guy's been invited to debate, he has showed up. When Heidi bailed out of the Lars Larson debate, Lars made one phone call, Lars' producer made one phone call to Brent's campaign, and Brent said, yeah, I'll show up tomorrow. And he's a Democrat that walked in for a second time essentially against Lars and I mean, because it's a conservative leading show, but he showed up and he played. So, you know, you can see who really means business here and who doesn't.
Thanks. Okay, sorry. So as we're on the topic of this, there's a well-known pastor in California that was like, he sent out a video of like endorsing her or something, I don't know. And I was really taken back by that, so I emailed him. I gave him your information off of your page. I was like, no, I don't know. So I encouraged him to contact you and to talk to you. Because, first of all, he's in California with Newsom and all of those people. He's not here, and I just thought it was kind of shady.
Yep.
To sit there and
I mean,
encourage.
I'm honored for every endorsement that I've gotten. I mean, Heidi and I and Waddy, we did in the Trump endorsement. I mean, Trump's the leader of the party. I'm honored to have his endorsement. We had to pick something, and that's what we picked. So all these other endorsements here and there, like, they're nice, but I mean, like, what do they?
Yeah.
They don't mean that much, unfortunately. I'm sure that pastor's a great guy, and I'm grateful for every endorsement that I get. I mean it, but I mean, like, I'll always fall back on the Trump endorsement. I mean, Trump's the leader of our party, but we had to pick something, and that's what we chose. And she opted to go against her word, so it is what it is, you know.
It's not very true.
We'll just keep moving.
All right.
Well, thank you very much, man. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks for giving us your platform, and thank all of you for coming out.
All right, guys, I'll go live a bit later.
Oh, next Tuesday, come back here. We're gonna do a straw poll. We need you guys all to tell your friends. We're gonna do a straw poll here next Tuesday, where you can vote for me, hopefully, or you can vote in